Great, man. Let's get this thing rolling.
And Gumpy in the back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
AQ, first and foremost, congratulations. You got another one on the way.
Thank you, man.
Very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very happy for you.
Babe.
I appreciate that. Yeah, another girl. I don't know what I have to do to have a boy, but it's really not working. Whatever I'm doing is not working.
It's tough. Maybe change your diet? I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, the guys keep telling me it's because I'm Irish and white, if you get what I'm saying. It's not reaching far enough.
Could be, not a young strapping Italian man like myself.
Yeah.
Or, Canadian. I mean, you're both bald. You and Gump, you got that in common at least. I don't know.
Got that in common, yeah.
But all right, enough about us. Let's talk about someone who we can't seem to stop talking about, even though as much as I'd want to. Alex Ovechkin is on an absolute tear. Did not miss any time after his, missing of time during the All-Star break. He serves his suspension, comes back. It's like he never left. It didn't even matter. The guy is still scoring at an absolute incredible pace. 3 goals in 4 minutes and 24 seconds of actual game time, the fastest hat trick in his career the other night. It's his 27th career hat trick. That in and of itself is pretty outstanding. He passes Maurice Richard for 8th most in NHL history in hat tricks. 14 goals in his last 7 games, 3 hat tricks in his last 6 games. He's moved up the scoring list. He's now at 698, 2 shy of becoming the 8th player all-time to score 700 career goals. Is this guy going to stop anytime soon? Oh, and by the way, his fastest player to hit 40 goals on the season.
I don't see him stopping anytime soon. Not this year, not next year. I mean, as long as the guy stays healthy, which, knock on wood, he's been able to do. I mean, the guy just scores at an unbelievable pace, and it's pretty amazing. I read a stat this morning that he would be tied with Gretzky for most 40-goal seasons had it not been for that lockout year. And he had something stupid then, like 32 goals in 38 games or something like that.
Yeah, that lockout. I was thinking about that one, too, when I looked at the list of players that he's behind on his way to catch Gretzky, the race to 700 here. He needs 2 more to 700, obviously, but he's behind Mike Gartner at 708. Then you go Phil Esposito, 717, Marcel Dion, Brett Hull, Yager at 766, then Gordie Howe at 2 with 801. Gretzky, obviously, number 1 at 894. But I was thinking about Yager, actually, when I thought about missing time in those seasons. Because if Yager hadn't went overseas to play those couple seasons in the KHL and stayed in the NHL, he is easily passing Gordie Howe for second all-time. And I think that would have been a pretty outstanding career accomplishment for Yags. Speaking not just to the longevity of his career, but also the skill level as well. But Ovechkin, man, yeah, I don't see him stopping down because injuries have never been a problem in his career. He's never missed significant time or had a major injury that slowed him down. The only thing that's honestly slowed him down has been coaches tinkering with him and the team for a while there and putting him in a position that he didn't feel like he could succeed in, or that he could freelance enough, or that he could be himself enough. As long as you just let this guy go and let him do what he does best, set him up in his office, and tee up those one-timers in the power play, which their power play hasn't been outstanding this season. He's doing a lot of this at 5-on-5, which makes it even more impressive. The guy's an absolute phenom, a wonder. I get tired, like I said earlier, I get tired of saying all these nice things about him because we're Penguins fans. I'm sick of it. But you can't help but watch in astonishment at what he does, because he does it every single night. There are no nights off for this guy. He was 40, 45, 50 minutes into that game the other night, and he didn't even have a shot on net. And it was like, all right, I'll wake up now. I'm just going to go score a hat trick and win the game.
Which is insane. I mean, just his ability to score goals is, I mean, it's unprecedented, and it's super impressive to watch. I mean, it's one of the more impressive things, I think, in any sport today. I mean, it's just unbelievable the way that he's able to do it, and at the pace he's been able to do it. To think that he has an absolute legitimate chance to catch Gretzky, I don't think anybody in their mother would have ever thought that record would ever get touched. And he has a legitimate chance, which is insane.
Well, they always said he couldn't do it, playing the way he does. And I think once he got the cup and getting the monkey off his back, now he's playing even more free than he ever has.
It's a good point. Yeah, it's like the weight of the world has been lifted off his shoulders. Now he's achieved that team success, and now he can still score all these goals, and people aren't talking about it being about him anymore, which was what used to be the narrative with him. He's not out there showboating. I mean, he's doing it quote unquote the right way, the old school way, the hockey way, and he's still putting up these insane numbers, and now no one's on his back like, well, he's too selfish, well, he doesn't pass enough, well, he doesn't go to the net. Like he's proven all those people wrong and all the doubters. And the numbers are, I can't say enough, the numbers are absolutely insane. The model of consistency doesn't get hurt, just does it night after night. It's fun to watch. And I hope he beats him, to be honest. I really do, because as much as I hate the Caps fans have that feather in their hat and bragging rights and all that, the Gretzky record, like it's just so old school. And we talk about it all the time, but like the goalies back then, it was so different. This would be one of the most monumental feats to break this record in the modern era, with the way the goaltending has changed, the way the skill level has changed from defensemen to opposing centers playing much more defensively, and teams scheming, and the advances in analytics, which we'll get to later, and the coaching staff, all the information available now. It's incredible to see and awesome to see. Another thing that's blowing my mind is, we don't talk about them enough probably, the Columbus Blue Jackets on the run that they are on, strictly due to the incredible coaching of John Tortorella, because the roster isn't that great. Let's be honest. They lost a bunch of guys in free agency. They loaded up for the Cup last year. They did end up sweeping Tampa in the first round, but they weren't able to make that long run, and they lose guys in free agency. But they found a guy in Elvis Merzlikins, this goalie, who seemingly just bursts on the scene out of nowhere. They've won 8 of their last 9 games, 4 shutouts for Merzlikins in that span. He's 11-2-0 in his last 13, 951 save percentage. Like, these numbers are through the roof. He's entering the Rookie of the Year conversation, which I think is still Cale Makar's in Toronto area, in Colorado's. But it's impressive because they lose Bobrovsky. What are they going to do in net? Everyone's thinking like, oh no, can they replace Bobrovsky? Well, here they go, the young stud Elvis Merzlikins, and it's like they haven't missed a beat. If arguably they've become better.
No question. He's been incredible. I think Torch deserves a heck of a lot of credit for this job he's been doing. I mean, they lose Panarin, they lose Bobrovsky. Everybody thinks they're going to be in rebuild mode, and they've just stuck with the same system. Torch has kind of run the same exact thing he's always done. He's just got younger players, not as good a talent, but they've been relying more on their goalie and their back end, which they haven't had to do the last couple of years, and it's been a nice key to success for them moving forward.
Seth Jones playing 25 minutes a night. I mean, this is the player Nashville thought they were getting when he came into the league.
Yeah,
I love him as a player. He's playing well this year.
Good call, and it's guys like that playing strong defensively, because they're not putting up a ton of goals. They don't have a ton of high-end offensive talent. They just have guys all buying in, blocking shots the Tortorella way, putting their bodies on the line, and they're getting timely scoring. Foligno there, that guy epitomizes that team. He's the captain. He's the guy, again, not a ton of goals on the year, and he's shown he can score in the past, but their penalty kill is outstanding. They don't beat themselves. You have to go in there and you have to earn a win. They're not going to beat themselves. Hats off to Columbus, because I thought they would be a lottery pick this season with the team that they put on the ice. But they proved me wrong, and they've proven many people wrong. So I don't feel too bad about it. Another note on goaltending, a tough spot here for Toronto. The Leafs lose Frederik Andersen. Looks like it could be a pretty significant injury. He might miss some time. And Elliot Friedman, in his 31 Thoughts column, said that the GM, Kyle Dubas, has made it clear he won't trade for a goalie unless the upgrade is significant and the cost isn't prohibitive, which those two things don't really go hand in hand. If you're going to make a significant upgrade, it's usually going to cost you something. So if other teams sense desperation, Elliot says, we always know they throw you anvils, not life preservers. So the Leafs are going to look at the market, and there's not a ton of goalies out there, to be honest. You're basically, at this point, you're scouring for another team's backup, or you're looking for a team that's down at the bottom of the standings trying to pry away a starter, probably a rental away from them, until you can get Freddie Andersen back, who I've had my doubts about as being a starter in the playoffs and carrying that team to a cup anyways. Now, super interesting, because a couple months ago, you could have had Tristan Jarry for pretty cheap. Now his stock is through the roof. Matt Murray's playing well again. I think he's got like 6 straight wins. I don't see the Penguins moving either one of those goaltenders. I think Toronto's in a bad spot here, though. I do think if they're serious about making a run and this Anderson injury is serious, they're going to have to give up something significant and patch this goaltending hole. And it's so tough to do mid-season. It's not like you can find a guy down in your minor league team and pull them up and go on a magical run. That is very rare where something like that happens. They're in a tough spot. What can Toronto do here? What do the Leafs need to do?
I'll throw something interesting out there. I think just because obviously we're so close to Pittsburgh and the Penguins and stuff like that, but Casey DeSmith proved to be
people forget about him.
A good enough goaltender at the NHL level. He's obviously back in the AHL level this year because of the move they made with Jari early and what Jari's been able to do. But he was the Penguins' number 2 last year and played plenty of games when Murray had his rough stretch as well, like he does every year. You know my thoughts on that. But, I think Casey DeSmith is an upgrade. I think, obviously, with Frederik Andersen being down, I think he's as good, if not better, than most backup goaltenders in this league.
That's a good call. There's another name I'll throw out here, and it kind of depends on how the rest of Chicago seasons go. But I look at Robin Lehner. He bounced back with the Islanders, goes to Chicago. He's on a 1-year deal. He's looking for a long-term deal. But if you're in the case of the Leafs where you need this guy and Chicago either doesn't make this push or maybe you think you can sweeten up the deal enough to get him away from them because you think you have a shot. I know the East is tough, but the West is tougher to me in terms of the teams you have to go through. So I'd look at Robin Lehner as a possible solution and a possible long-term solution for them because the guy's shown he's back. He had some issues in the past. It seems like he's put those behind him, and he's a stud. He's putting up great numbers. He looks like a guy that can be the answer on the back end for them. So I don't know, Toronto.
I agree. I mean, I have a hard time seeing them move him because he himself, I feel, has been a huge part of their resurgence and actually getting back into playoff position. I mean, but obviously, if a team feels like they're in rebuild mode and feels like they can get something that's worth getting, in a deal like that, then it's worth making that move. Yeah,
I think with Corey Crawford already there, and I don't see them moving on from him just yet. I know he's had some struggles this season as well, but I don't see them moving on from him yet. And Lehner not locked up long term. I think it makes sense as a possible solution. Like, hey, we could get something significant from the Leafs. Maybe you can probably I don't know, you'd have to package stuff correctly, but maybe you can probably like a William Nylander or Kasperi Kapanen away from the Leafs and get yourself a nice young forward for Chicago to build their fucking core back up because they've had their struggles recently. Another thing I want to talk about here before we get to our interview with Jesse, the Vancouver Canucks, who were on quite an impressive run, shot all the way up to first in the Pacific. They went ahead and, they got the doors blown off by Boston the other night 4-0, which, no big deal. That's going to happen. They've had a good run of wins here recently. But something was interesting. JT Miller went ahead and said after the game, look, I don't think Boston's anything special. They're a good hockey team. I'm not sitting here like, oh, we're playing this team tonight. We're a good hockey team. We should have that swag about us too. Do you see anything wrong with that statement? Because I think he got grilled a little bit on Twitter for that. I liked it coming from him. I like it, that mentality of like, you don't see it enough in hockey. You don't see it enough. Like you see too much curtailing and just glad handing the other team like, oh, they're great. We're going to pump their tires. I like every once in a while come out and be like, look, we have a good team too, and I'm not ashamed to say it. People, especially when you're a West Coast team that probably doesn't get the love that everyone else does in the media. Hey, look at us. Look what we're doing. Guys, pay attention. We're putting together a solid run here. I
love when people do that. I love when people recognize that they have a good team too, because so many times when you speak with media members, they sit there and they're like, oh, you're getting ready to play the New England Patriots. Oh, you're getting ready to play the Pittsburgh Penguins. You're getting ready to play the Boston Bruins. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. We're 12-2 or whatever it is at the time too. Like I don't give a shit, And I think you get so wrapped into coaches saying, hey, don't put any bulletin board out messages out there so teams can put it out there and do that. But I think, especially in a sport like hockey, where you play 3 games a week, you play 2 games a week, and you only see a team, twice a year or whatever it is, if on a West Coast, East Coast deal. And I think more teams, more players need to sit there and say, listen, like, we're a good team too. Like, we don't need to have this aura over the Boston Bruins or the Pittsburgh Penguins or whatever because they've been good for 15, 20 years. Like, we're good too. We were in the playoffs. We're a good team. We got everybody we need, and here we are. So, I will say this though, Boston's pretty fucking special. So you might not want to poke the bear too much. I'm just saying.
Great point. I love to see it, especially from Vancouver, because Gumpy, you can probably speak this a little bit. I know you're not a Canucks fan, but you live in the area, so you've probably seen it. Like, they were taking an absolute beating in the media the past couple of years. Like, oh, this team stinks. What the hell are they doing? They have no direction. Yeah, a lot of turnover, but they get Elias Pettersson come in. They've made a few moves. Brock Besser, promising young guy. They've got some young talent. Bo Horvat, the you know what I mean? They got guys now.
You look at their team on their roster. They've come together. I mean, they got 6 guys guys over 15 goals, 7 guys over 30 points. I mean,
it's not just Pettersson. They have players.
It's been a real team effort, and they've come together a lot quicker than anybody would have ever thought.
All right, we're talking about support and picking our guys up when we're down. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the ultimate in support for you. Let me introduce you to Sheath Underwear, a veteran-owned company with underwear that's uniquely effective at keeping your balls off your leg. Now, all know what I'm talking about. It does this by way of kangaroo pouch inside the underwear to isolate your Joey package. This pouch inside the underwear is a whole new ball game. They are unbelievably comfortable and invented by a soldier while serving us overseas in Iraq, where you can imagine the balls tend to get very hot. It's like you, AQ, out there in that desert.
Chief, real quick.
Yeah, you got to powder up. So he developed the prototype while serving in Iraq, and then he did a Kickstarter, and now they're sponsoring our show. Please support our sponsors, because our sponsors keep this show going, and you're not only supporting us, but Sheath will support you and your package. It'll feel like your balls are floating on clouds. How's that feel? You like that? Huh? You like the sound of that, AQ?
Love it.
True story. Go see the reviews. Sheath are amazing, and if you don't love them, they have a 100% money-back guarantee off your first pair. We personally guarantee you're going to love Sheath because we love Sheath. And if you don't, they'll give you your money back. You'll feel like a superhero when you put these on, and you or your guy or your girl will appreciate you the way you look at them. That's right, ladies. We didn't forget about you. Sheath has a woman's line that gets 5-star ratings as well. All their products are available on Amazon Prime, or go to sheathunderwear.com. That's SHEATH underwear.com. Seek it and ye shall find it. I'm talking about comfort. You are welcome for this introduction to the most comfortable underwear on the planet with genius ergonomic design. Thank us later and go check out sheathunderwear.com. Promo code hockey saves 20% off your first order. That's sheathunderwear.com. Promo code hockey. All right, let's get to the interview. Joining us now on the phone, he writes for The Athletic, but I've been following this guy for a really long time, way before The Athletic even existed. He's been a presence on Penguins Twitter, and now he's making his mark on hockey Twitter in general. He is on the forefront of analytics, and that's kind of why we asked him to join the show, because AQ and I are big dummies when it comes to this stuff. We want to get a little more insight. Please welcome host of Dying Alive pod for The Athletic. You can find him on Twitter at JMarshFOF, Jesse Marshall. Jesse, how you doing today?
Good, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So, please, help us out here. We want to get to know, and our audience, a lot of listeners we have are fairly new to the game of hockey or casual fans. We want to kind of introduce them to what analytics can do for the game and what it means, because we see all these charts and everything, especially that you tweet out on Twitter, and we're just kind of clueless looking at this stuff. So if you could kind of give us a crash course, kind of guide us through some stuff to look for and to help us evaluate some of these guys.
Sure, yeah. So we have to start with the understanding of why we're looking at some of this stuff, right? Because the background information to me is what makes this important, right? I mean, I could talk about like expected goals and all this stuff until I'm blue in the face, but like, how is it applicable, right? Why would we even consider this stuff? Well, agree or disagree, guys, goals are the most important thing in hockey. You can't score.
Hard agree. I'm in on that.
Yeah. It's hard to win games when you don't score. Goals are also the most random thing in the game. They're influenced by chaos, right? If you pulled together the top 6 forwards of every team in the National Hockey League that's been in the league for, we'll say the last 3 years, right?
Sure.
And you looked at their shooting percentage year over year, what they shot from one year to the next has almost absolutely no correlation to it. It's just random noise. Goalies get hot, goalies get cold. Shooters get hot, shooters get cold. So if you want to predict the future, which is what we're all striving to do, that's what general managers are trying to do. It's what fans want to do. If you want to predict the future and you want to know where the success of your team is headed, goals are the worst way to do it. Of all the metrics that we'll probably talk about today, goals is the one with the least predictive value. So that doesn't mean goals aren't important. It means the process to getting those goals may be more important than the goals themselves. And when we talk about things like puck possession, right, which is a huge, everybody knows about Corsi, right? It's the like Coca-Cola of advanced hockey statistics.
Sure.
Corsi is again more predictive than goal scoring. Expected goals, right? Scoring chances, the stuff that we'll talk about, I'm sure today. That's all more predictive than future goal scoring. So if we went to the sports book together and we wanted to slap down bets on the playoffs and you took prior goal scoring and I took expected goals for the year, you might as well just slap my name on your checkbook permanently because I'm going to be taking your money the whole time. So to me, that's why it's important, not only about the predictive piece, guys, but it's context. When a goal is scored, there's 10 guys on the ice, right? We don't really know, where's the responsibility for that goal against lie? And, I hate plus minus. I think it's the worst statistic in hockey, and that's one of the reasons why. Plus minus tells you something happened, but it doesn't explain the why. There's no context to it. And advanced analytics in hockey can help give us some of that context. It not only just say something happened, but here's why it happened and here's how it happened. And we can even from that extrapolate on things like luck and regression and all this other stuff. But for me, it's about predictability and it's about context.
All right, so explain to me this then. All right, so we're talking analytics. Okay, so what would you say are the I'll give you a number. What's the three most important statistics when it comes to analytics? If you were a general manager and you were looking at analytics, what are the three most important things to you to look at?
The thing is, though, I think that depends on what the question is, right? For me, I don't think that you can take analytics and look at a bucket or two buckets and make any kind of definitive statement off it, right? I would equate that to watching tape, but skipping, every third. What are you really garnering, when you're not watching the full scope of things? Now, if I were to talk to you about what I put a lot of importance on and what I constantly, I guess, more or less am sort of looking at on a rolling basis, expected goals is the big one, right? It's the big one. Not only is it really, like we said, the most predictive metric that we've got, but it tells us about the quality of a shot. It's the closest thing we have to saying this shot is more valuable than this one because whether it was a one-timer, it was taken off the rush, or it was a cross-crease pass. We can assign weights to these things, and we could say, look, based on where and when and why this shot was taken, we would expect it to go in the net more, obviously, than one that comes like a little flubber from the point. So expected goals is a big one. I think puck possession is important. I think Corsi is important only because we have a long-standing history of using it and knowing that if you want to win the Stanley Cup, you need to find yourself within a certain bracket as far as puck possession is concerned. Now it's not to say that you can't win if you're not there. It's just a lot harder to, I think any time you're on the plus side of puck possession, you're increasing your ability to control a 7-game series. And then the other one that I look at is and this one's not really fanciful or talked about much. I love looking at PDO, which is kind of like the hockey's community of trying to get a hold of luck, right? Shooting percentages and save percentages are things we mentioned that kind of fluctuate violently at random throughout the course of a year. And with the PDO statistic, what we're really trying to do is gauge, it's like playing the NHL stock market. Based on this guy's performance, has Lady Luck been kind to him? How much of his results are him shooting the lights out, and how much of it is, the process behind it? So for me, I love playing around with those three tools. I use them a lot in the articles that I write, and I think that they can go a long way towards, giving us a little bit of extra insight into how this stuff works.
All right, so let me piggyback off that. So then do you ever see, right? So you watch tape, right? Let's say we're watching, I'm going to throw a name out there because he's my favorite player of all time, Sidney Crosby, right? We're watching Sidney Crosby. We're watching a ton of tape. We're seeing him play like an absolute animal on the ice, right? But do you ever see a statistic whenever it comes to analytics where you look at the analytics and it's like, wait a second, that doesn't match up with what I'm seeing on tape?
I'll give you one present-day Penguin who I can say that about right now, like 2020 present day, Zach Aston Reese. I, for the life of me, guys, cannot. Zach Aston Reese has suddenly overnight become one of the best defensive forwards in hockey. And every metric that you can come up for Zach Aston Reese, other teams are basically accomplishing absolutely nothing against him when he's on the ice. So I'm like, okay, let's tune the video up and try to figure out what's happening that puts him in such a positive defensive light, and I can't find it. I don't know what it is. And I think, honestly, it's just the fact that his line spends such little time back there. I think that really they just spend so much time on the front foot playing offense that it makes those defensive numbers look maybe a lot better than they would be if he was in a different kind of an environment. So I've been in situations, guys, where I've sat down at my computer with the intention to write an article, thinking full well that I was going to log online and the data was going to agree with me, only to have the entire thing wrecked and my hypotheses crumble right in front of my eyes before I even type a word.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
And I think that's the fun part about it, is it's fun to be proven wrong. And I think anytime you get to be proven wrong, you learn something. It's an eye-opening experience. So, I mean, for me, trying to marry the two together and the data and the video, that's the most fun part of this whole thing.
And that's on me. I should have mentioned that in the intro, Jesse. I know, like, you do incredible video breakdowns as well that you write up. It include little video pieces with illustrations on them and everything, almost like a telestrator to let everyone know what you're talking about, which definitely helps, and it's very well done. One thing I want to talk about was, we'll reference the Penguins again because you cover them, and we're obviously huge fans, but I remember the Brandon Tanev signing. Everyone was a little weary because of the length and the term. And I remember you questioning the signing because it was a matter of, okay, is he really that good of a defensive forward, or is he being propped up by, I think it was Adam Lowry. Yeah, he was playing with. And it turns out he is actually pretty good in his own right. But that's something that it was hard to tell from those analytics. Are there other ways to try and figure out those types of situations where it's like, okay, is this guy actually worth a damn? Or is he just being completely carried by his line? Or is that the case when you just have to go to the tape and be like, all right, look, there's no other way to tell this?
This is a really good example of like how far we've come with this analytics thing in such a short period of time. So it's so funny you remember that conversation, because at the time I kept looking at Brandon Tanev's results, and when you took him away from Adam Lowry, it was like he was a completely different player, right? And I got in a conversation with Allison Lucon, who writes a lot of analytics stuff and works for the Columbus extension of The Athletic. I have a lot of respect for Allison. In a lot of ways, she's like a mentor for me. And I brought that up to her, and I said, Allison, I can't get past this, right? I can't move on from, like, how do we explain this, right? And she was like, well, I'll tell you how you explain it. Stop using the stat. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you got to remember, right, like, we lean on these with you, without you statistics in hockey, but in this situation, there are 10 players on the ice, right? And we're looking at only Adam Lowry and Brandon Tanev. Do we have better ways of evaluating the performance? Like, are there better ways of going into this and looking at this? Because that's the context piece that we're missing, right? So that was like an eye-opening conversation for me, where it was like, you know what, maybe it's time, like, where we have enough data that we could use, that we move past this with you, without you stuff, because maybe it isn't the most detailed, thing in the world. And maybe it was good for what we had in 2010. But it's 2020 now. We've come a long way, and maybe we can move past that. And it was like, you know what? Hey, good talk, right? Like, I agree 100%. And I quickly watched video on Tanev after that and was like, nah, this isn't Adam Lowry. Right? So maybe that's why it was so difficult to explain, is because there wasn't anything there,
right?
And there was no explanation to be had.
Makes sense. I mean, that's perfectly summed up. Here's what's a good resource for common folk like us to go look at these types? We'll call them fancy stats, for lack of a better term, just for shits.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the guys over at Natural Stat Trick. Not only is it a hilarious name, but they probably have the most easy user interface of any analytics website you're going to go to. The information there is really digestible. They have a really thorough glossary that'll teach you the terms you're looking for. It'll teach you how to use the system. It's really easy to figure out once you play around on it a little bit. And I just, for me, I think, around the time that this stuff started to become popular, we were looking for ways to kind of quantify things that were happening on the ice that we previously didn't have statistics for. So it's really kind of been a thing. I think it's been eye-opening for me since I started to get into it, because it'll really change your narrative, right? Your eye test, I think tells you one thing. I think sometimes, in the case of Chris Letang, this is probably the most apt example, is Chris Letang makes a lot of mistakes that stick out on video, right?
Yeah,
like we remember them because they're sometimes extremely egregious, but they're so few and far between, right? Like, they're not happening with the level of frequency that we might think. We just remember them, right? Because these are high-impact plays. But in the grand scheme of all his minutes, these really aren't, recurring mistakes that are coming at a level that we might think they are. So that kind of stuff kind of throws you into a whirl, and you might think one thing. You might be dead set on something happening one way, and then you look at the data and you're like, I don't think there's really anything to build off here.
All right, so let me, Nick probably preface this whole thing by saying that I was going to hammer you a little bit when it comes to analytics. So,
I quickly reminded him, AQ, that you and I are both Moon Township boys.
I love Pittsburgh guys through and through. I'm a big fan. I'm always fan of Pittsburgh guys. So, let me just go with this. So, here's my biggest, I guess, concern with it, right? So, PFF's obviously taken over the whole football world, and you know, you see these things from week to week and where people are ranked and this, that, and the other. And my biggest problem, my biggest issue, I think, in most people that play somewhere on the line in my position have the biggest issue is people that are watching film that are breaking these things down in analytics. How do you know what the scheme is, what they're supposed to be doing versus what they're doing on ice, right? There's plenty of times where a guy may go the wrong way, or, for instance, I'm going to throw something out there. If I'm playing Aaron Donald, scheme can go completely out the window. We're going to do everything we can to go to that guy, right? So, you know, I just don't know the people watching it and grading it, how they know that we're going to the right people and what we're doing versus, you know, what our coaches are telling us to do. So that's my biggest question when it comes to this.
Here's where I think that problem manifests itself in hockey, to your point, AQ, is coaching in the National Hockey League is something that has a major impact on the results of the team, okay? Example, right? We all remember Mike Johnston's forgettable tenure with the Penguins, right?
Yikes, yeah.
From a systematic perspective, he basically opened the door up and said, hey, come on in, okay? Come on into our zone. We care so much about playing defense, we're going to do it more than we need to. Come on in, right? Let's have a party in our defensive zone. And you go back and you look at Sidney Crosby and Chris Letang during his tenure, and all these advanced analytics that we're talking about today, they posted career lows. In the Mike Johnston era, these were players that went from dynamic generational talents to run-of-the-mill average performers, and it was solely because the coach was telling them, hey, go out and play this way. We can see this happen in season this year with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Go on Natural Stat Trick and pull up their results under Mike Babcock, and then go pull them up under Sheldon Keefe. It's almost like a completely different hockey team, right? So I think the challenge for a lot of people is how do you marry these two things? And how do we account for a defensive, you know, caveman, you know, I'll throw Ken Hitchcock under the bus for the hell of it. Ken Hitchcock-esque coach, right, who's always going to put up bad defensive numbers and is always going to make his team play more defense than necessary. We're not yet at a point where we can talk to that stuff with nuance. That's a problem. It's 100% a problem. And I'll give you one more, right? Shot maps, heat maps.
Yeah,
we use them all the time.
Everywhere.
Right, super popular. But, like, how do you know a team doesn't want to give up shots from an area, right? Like, I see like a lot of maps that will have a heat map that's just at the top of the circle off to the side of the ice, and people are like saying like, well, that could be a high danger area. But for me as a coach, like I kind of want you to shoot there over the slot, you know, like so for me that's not really a problem. You know, I just think that we haven't yet, and to be fair, the NFL, MLB, well, not so much baseball, but the NFL makes itself way more accessible with regards to play calling and structure than the NHL does. I don't think we spend enough time talking about systems in hockey, point blank, period, right? These NBCs and all the big networks of the world, they want to invent player-on-player narratives, where I think we have much more interesting stories with regards to the way that two teams are attacking each other. We don't ever talk about that stuff.
Never.
So, AQ, you have a really good point, right? And that doesn't make the data any less valid. But for the common Joe Schmo that just wants to watch the game and enjoys hockey, if you can't relate it to some functional piece of what's happening on the ice, you've lost a bit of context, in my opinion.
Okay.
Agree. Yeah, that was my whole thing.
So you mentioned high danger area in there. Can you explain on that one a little bit? Because I see that pop up all the time as well, and I think I know what it means, but I think I want everyone to be sure. So basically, in my mind, that's the area of the ice where you're getting a lot of scoring chances from, or you're giving up a lot of scoring chances. And I see it with correct me if I'm wrong, but I see it with goaltenders a lot in evaluating them. Yeah,
it's location of the shot or the scoring chance. That's all it is. So when we talk about high danger, like draw a home plate in front of the crease, right? Anything, I would say, from post to post out into the slot, that's going to be considered high danger. That's generally the area every team in the league wants to protect the most. Whether that be via their structure and how they play defense as a 5-man unit, or how they approach things like odd man breaks and odd man rushes. The goal is just to not give away the slot. So when we're looking at those high danger chances, we're kind of like contextualizing a scoring chance even more. I'll be honest with you, I've stopped doing that because the expected goals takes that same idea and puts a number behind it. So in my mind, if I could work off a number, I'd much rather do that, because now we get into like, well, there's high danger chances, and then there's medium danger chances, and then there's low danger chances. And when you bucket them like that, all you're doing is making the sample size smaller, right? Like, why would I care about something that's less of a sample size? So for me, I've shifted my own philosophy into just using expected goals, because now every shot has a weight, right? And we could put a number behind it, and we could look at 2 scoring chances and actually weight them on which one would have been more likely to go in. Just because you took a shot from the front of the net doesn't mean it was a good one, right? Like, if you were on the backhand, and the goalie had 5 seconds to get over, and you had a defenseman draped on your back, I don't really know that I would consider that all that high danger of a scoring chance, right? So, like, expected goals would number that lower and would say, yeah, it came from a high danger area, but it's not really all that of a threat. And I think for me, it's just a much better way of looking at it with all the data we have available.
You sold me. You just changed my philosophy there, too. All right, here's another one. So the Penguins just recently gave a ton of money to Marcus Pettersson, defenseman, a second pairing, top 4 defenseman, who a lot of people, when the tweets started coming out, a lot of people I see replying to the tweets like, who? Who's this guy? Oh, that's an overpayment, because they're only looking at his goals, his assists, his point totals, and his plus-minus. When in reality, if you're a Penguins fan, you watch this guy, he passes the eye test. You can see he's a stud out there. Do the analytics numbers back up that type of payment? I think it was a 5-year deal, $4 million per year.
Yeah, let me introduce you guys to the glorious world of Microstats. We kind of have like this. We've talked about all these base level stats, right, that the National Hockey League keeps track of now, and you can get in a lot of different places. But now we've got people out there that are dedicating all of their time to making public data available with regards to things we never thought about before, like zone entries.
Yeah.
So, like, the job of a defenseman, right, you don't want the forward coming across the blue line with the puck. So now we can start to – the problem with this, guys, is that we literally have people out there in the world manually doing this stuff every day. They've opened up, like, a Patreon account. This is what they do now.
Really?
But, yeah. From The Athletic, actually, in Chicago, Corey Snyder, he opened up a Patreon account. He started to do this years ago. People started to flood his Patreon with donations. Now this is what he does. He literally does this as a full-time job. The problem is he works alone, and there are 82 games per team in the National Hockey League, which means tracking all that is like a really overwhelming task. And even if you're putting in 10-hour days, how long does it take to do one game, So long story short, this is, I think, Marcus Pettersson, I think, is a guy who is basically the team average, Nick, if you want me to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Relative to his teammates, he's basically a 0% everything. So he's kind of the baseline, I think, in a lot of ways. But where he really shines is in this microstat data and his ability to keep teams out of the defensive zone with that long reach and its good gap control. I think that's where he shines. So noting that the cap's going to go up, noting what some other players around the league making that amount look like, analytically speaking, I think the Penguins did really well here. They it's a situation for me where as a 23-year-old, he's only going to get better, so it's get while the getting's good, right? You don't want him to cost more later because you waited. And I think we have enough evidence and enough sample size to say, like, hey, this is a player you can comfortably put into any number of positions, and you're going to get a really decent result out of them.
Let me piggyback off that, too, and give you one more thing that I think is amazing about Marcus Pettersson is they say it a lot in our sport, and I think they say it a lot in every sport, but the best ability maybe is his availability. The guy's always on the ice. Yeah, he's always on the ice, right?
Yeah, there you go. And I'll make that into a hockey adage. The best defenseman is the one you don't talk about on the way home after the game. The best defenseman is the one you don't see, the one you don't notice. There's people are not piling in their cars after a night at PPG going, man, can you believe how good Marcus Pettersson was tonight? It's like the old Rob Scuderi from 2009, when he was the piece. That we always said that about him. His best ability is his invisibility, and Marcus Pettersson has that in spades. And you think, like, man, what is a line of him and John Marino going to look like 2 years from now? That's kind of terrifying, right? I mean, that's a significantly terrifying prospect, or a prospect to think about.
Agree. All right, let me ask one more thing here. So if I understand kind of the way teams are looking at analytics correctly, I think they're looking at it as a tool, right? It's not the end-all, be-all, but it's another tool they can use in the evaluation process along with film and character and all this other stuff, correct? So my biggest question is, of all the teams in the NHL, one, have they all bought in completely to analytics? And two, if they haven't all, is there, a handful of 15, 16 teams or however many teams that have fully bought into using this?
Okay, so answer A, unequivocally, no, AQ. This is still very much a taboo subject for a lot of people, especially some of I hate the older guys hate it, right? Like, listen to Pierre Maguire talk about analytics sometimes. And it's like, I think it takes away their ability to tell a narrative story, right? That's what they've done their whole lives, is talk about heart and grit and determination and all those adjectives they use to describe Jonathan Toews, right?
It's a good point, yeah.
You take that away from them, and it's all of a sudden now, like, I feel like there's a vulnerability to being wrong, maybe. I think that they don't feel that they need that context. I will tell you that, as far as teams who embrace it go, John Chayka, the general manager of the Arizona Coyotes, and his sister Megan Chayka does unbelievable work in Canada with Statleets, the company she heads up there. He's really pushed the Coyotes forward this year, and he's doing it in a Moneyball way, right? This is sort of the same model they tried in Florida a couple years ago, but they had no patience. With Dale Talon involved, he's sort of one of the sort of anti-analytics brigade. He kind of blew it up early and then used it as a marker to say, hey, look, it doesn't work. When in fact, I don't know that it was ever an feature. Arizona would be my model. The Penguins I'll say this, man. I know a lot of people in the analytics community. There probably isn't a single one I respect more than Sam Ventura of the Penguins. I learned a lot from Sam when I was kind of coming up in the game, and he taught me the majority of the things that I know. I hear from him less now by virtue of the fact that he works for the team. I think he avoids me because he knows I'm going to ask him for information.
Smart.
But we still talk, and I know that he a really big role with that team, and to what extent and to what they look at, we don't know. Right? That's the thing; they'll never say. I know Columbus is another one. John Tortorella, surprisingly enough, cares a whole lot about scoring chances. And that is really something that he predicates a lot of his coaching around. If he feels as though his team's not generating scoring chances at a good enough rate, he's looking at his own process. So I'd point there. That's just three off the top of my head. That three teams that have had some modicum of success over the last little bit. Arizona, it's more recent, obviously, this year, but we're moving and changing directions in this sport. I'll marry these two things together, and I don't mind doing it, but I think the rise in analytics has coincided with the rise in a decrease in fighting. It's coincided in a rise in caring about headshots. It's coincided with a rise in caring about the quality of the game of hockey. Is the game we're watching fun and good? That should be the question that we are asking ourselves on an almost constant basis. And I think that generations are changing right in front of us, and I think that that's going to be good for the game in and of itself all the way around. It's going to be better for the players and the health of the players after the game. I just think we're moving in a direction where this sport is going to make itself a lot more accessible to a lot more people in a lot of different ways, and that's nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in that regard. Information is key, man. The more information available, the better educated you can make these decisions. Whether you agree with them or not is another thing that we could spend hours arguing about. But I got one more question for you, and we'll let you get out of here. And I'm trying to ask this to every guest from now on. If there's one thing you could change about the NHL right now, what would it be?
I would change the way the game's officiated. I would make. So we do this thing in the National Hockey League where every year we pick a focus, right?
Yeah.
And AQ, this happens in the NFL too, right?
It does. Yeah, we get a thing every week, and it's like, hey, this is gonna be the focus of the week, right?
Yeah, but like in the NHL, it's like a topic for the year, but it only lasts for like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So they don't renew it every week. They only do it once, and they only care about it for months. I think the biggest detriment to the sport right now is that over the course of the last 2-3 years, we've talked more in the Stanley Cup final about the quality of the officiating than we have talked about the games, and we've had some really damn good games, man. Some really good games, some really good finals that should be promoting how good the sport is, but the officiating is a stain, and I cannot stand that we are in a position, and I know that this happens in other sports too, but the NHL takes it to an extreme, that this whole put the whistles away and let them play, right? No, a penalty is a penalty, and if it's always a penalty, you're going to make the game faster, you're going to make the quality of the game better, you're going to get more goals, you're going to get more scoring chances, defensemen are going to have to change the way they play. We have done an amazing job of changing the culture in hockey at a young age, right? Players these days, you go to a youth game down the road, they all have stop signs on their backs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've changed the culture. But when these players turn professional, we don't care about it anymore. So why are we grooming these kids to play a certain way and then not enforcing it the right way when they become adults? It's confusing to me. It's confusing for them. I think there's a lot of situations where people don't know what goalie interference is anymore. They have no idea what's going to get called.
Couldn't tell you.
There's just too many gray areas, man. Way too many gray areas. And if we could get rid of those, and we could change the way this game's officiated, we could make it even better and even more exciting.
I like it, man.
It's a lot like pass interference in our game too. I get it, man.
Yeah, pass interference. It's like it's a subjective thing, and we have no idea what we're going to get. And sometimes we pay really close attention to it. And sometimes, like the NFL, you change your rule for it entirely. You know, the pass interference of the NHL is the offside rule, and whether or not a player's skate is touching the blue line or not at the time. You know, and it's like that's not what we were supposed to be using this for, and we haven't really done anything about it, and it's still not good. And yeah, I mean, there's just so much we could do such a better job of it.
Well, Jesse, thank you for educating us. Thank you for joining us. I feel 1,000 times smarter already. I appreciate you taking the time. Everyone listening, please go check out Jesse at JMarshFOF on Twitter. He's got the Dying Live podcast, and he writes great words for The Athletic, man. He puts beautiful pieces together with video, not just analytics, not just totally analytics. There's a lot of good video work and video breakdowns as well. So go check him out. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks anytime, guys.
Appreciate it.
That has been my biggest issue with analytics the whole time. Is people don't know what is being called, or how you're being coached to do it. That has been, and he said exactly what I thought he was going to say. That's a problem. You know what I mean?
No, that's a great point. Pat talked about it too with PFF. Like for punters and kickers, it's a little bit different because you pretty much know what they're supposed to do. And then I guess the PFF guys came to them, the actual players, and said, hey, look, this is what we're evaluating. Is it the right thing, and is it the right way to be doing it? But that's very hard to do with the different tendencies and techniques as like offensive line play and everything. So
for sure,
it's an interesting discussion to have, but he was good.
Him talking about Babcock, though, that makes sense, right? I mean,
no doubt.
Past his time, you know what I mean?
Like, yeah, you see it a lot, which is funny because you look back and Babcock with the 09-08 Red Wings, like they were the model of puck possession, and it's funny how quickly that can change and what a drastic change it was at that.
No doubt.
All right, everyone, thanks for rocking with us. Go follow Jesse Marshall on Twitter at JMarshFOF. Give him a shout out. Also, we got shirts. Go check them out at the store, store.patmcafeeshow.com. Thanks for rocking with us. And that's Hockey Talk.